Guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about computer-assisted coding. What is it? If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. I have been a medical coder for over 10 years. I really love sharing the things that I know with all of you. So I hope you'll take a second, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and at the end of this video helps you, I hope that you will share it. Okay, so let's get started. All right. What is computer-assisted coding? I'm going to read the definition from... It is search health IT, .techtarget.com, okay? A computer-assisted coding system is software that analyzes healthcare documents and produces appropriate medical codes for specific phrases and terms within the document. Now, does this mean that this is going to replace medical coders? You may have heard about this, that there's going to be this software out there and we're not going to need medical coders anymore. This is simply not true, okay? Now, artificial intelligence and computer-assisted coding, they have been talking about this since before I started, okay? And there was a lot of panic about, is it going to make the medical coding field go away? No, it's not, because computers are only as smart as you're telling them to be. They are looking for words and phrases, but it doesn't have the thinking and the rationale like a human being, okay? It's going to select codes based on what it sees. So if the documentation says a certain phrase, right, then it's going to pick that code up. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that certain code is going to apply to whatever it is, because again, a human being has to look at it, reason, and see what is actually happening. Now, there are benefits to computer-assisted coding because it can select codes that maybe the coder didn't think about. And so essentially the coder is just kind of going through and auditing, but it's not going to wipe out the profession of medical coding altogether, okay? And this comes from AHIMA.org. Will computer-assisted coding replace medical coders? CAC, computer-assisted coding, will not replace the coder as the decision maker and code approver. A coder's expertise is vital to healthcare organizations even after they've implemented CAC, and especially as they move towards ICD-10. This was obviously written during ICD-9 times, okay? And I will say this also. How much does computer-assisted coding cost for the system? This comes from medsphere.com. CAC technology is not cheap. Hardware, initial licensing fees, ongoing maintenance fees, because remember these codes have to be updated, okay, every single year, all right? And needed IT support can easily run over $500,000 a year for a smaller health system, 1,000 beds, okay, about 1,000 bed hospital. And even though smaller hospitals generally pay less in licensing fees for the software, the per chart cost is often higher. So when you think about these things, they're thinking in terms of the technology, but then they're thinking about terms of cost. Cost is still going to be high. So this would have to mean that the provider's documentation has to be perfect in order for all of the codes to be selected appropriately. Because what if there's a code that is not able to be correctly assigned because the documentation is not there? So again, it's going to fall back on the provider to make sure that they are documenting appropriately. This is when we have to have a coder to look at these things. So with computer-assisted coding, it is not going to take over, so don't even think that. And sometimes when people, I'm going to be blunt again, when people aren't in the industry, when people are not medical coders and they say these things, they don't really know, okay? I am a medical coder. I know. I've been to the conferences for the last 6 years and I've listened to them talk about this. I've listened to them talk about AI and computer-assisted coding. I've heard it all, okay? And it all comes back to cost. And here's a new system that we have to work with. And then we have to get the providers on board. And the providers have to document a certain way and things like that. So with all of these things combined, no, absolutely not. There's going to be always that need for a very well-trained medical coder. Now, there is a benefit to computer-assisted coding, okay, that I will say that there is a bright side to it. If you're looking at the documentation, a brand new coder or a coder that has been around but perhaps not as seasoned, like they haven't been coding many different specialties, may not see certain codes that a computer-assisted program may be able to pick up. And so then it'll be easier for the coder to recognize, right? Because a lot of us are self-taught, okay? Some of us go to a school and some of us are lucky enough to have very good instructors, but then you have some, like me, who basically taught myself how to do it, okay? So it does take a lot of time. And sometimes medical coders get very frustrated with this. And I've seen where they just sort of want to give up because they don't kind of understand like what is happening and how do I know? And these things take time. And a lot of times when people are looking into this field, or even when they are studying it actively, it's like they get overwhelmed. Like, there is so much to learn. Yes, but you have to learn in baby steps, okay? In order for your knowledge base to expand and grow, you have to be willing to learn things at a steady pace, okay? The steadier the pace, the better you're going to be, right? Because then you're going to be able to know a lot more. Medical coding has been likened to learning a new language, okay? That is how specific it is. And when you think about the classification systems, right? You have the ICD-10 diagnosis system, you have the CPT coding system, you have the PCS coding system. That's 3 different languages that you have to learn, each with their own rules, each with their own thing, each with their own, you know, their own thing. And then of course HCPCS. I didn't even think about HCPCS until just now. But there's all those rules to those things. So using computer-assisted coding can help to make the code selection a little bit more fine, but it's not going to replace a medical coder. And again, it is expensive, okay? It's quite an investment. And when you think about it, that would mean that investment, you would have to rely a lot on the providers. And then what about the coder? You know what I'm saying? So there's got to be that equal balance. It's not going to be as easy as, well, we're just going to have a coder, the computer do it, okay? And that's what a lot of providers think, that it's going to be easy, just, you know, put it into the system and then the system will pick it up and the coding will be done all, you know, by this computer software. It's not as easy as that. You still have to have a coder double checking to make sure that everything is correct. And if you have a biller who hasn't been trained as a medical coder, the knowledge of a biller is not as technical as a medical coder. A biller has to know about the insurance companies, yes, and their function is extremely vital. But their knowledge base is not going to be the same as a medical coder. And this is why I always tell you guys to push to learn as much as you can, because with coding, it is so detailed. And the better your detail, like when you're looking at codes or you're looking at the documentation, the better the communication with the providers, the better the code selection is going to be when you are selecting the codes, because it'll be more detailed, okay? That there's a difference between asthma unspecified and intermittent asthma, okay? There's a difference between selecting a patient who has COPD and then seeing the documentation that the patient has asthma as well. Well, what kind of asthma is that? Because otherwise you're only picking up the COPD. So again, those details, that goes back to clinical documentation improvement. And that's not something that a computer-assisted coding is going to be able to flag on its own. Hey, you know, why aren't you giving me more detail on the asthma? What kind of asthma is it? Not that you're trying to poke the bear and look for more, but at the same time, if you are wanting to get that more detailed coding, this is something that needs to be talked about with providers. And if you're having a whole system code for you, it's not going to give you that detail that you need. Okay, so again, if you hear this, if somebody's telling you don't waste your time with coding, it's going to go away because they're going to have all these systems to do it, and it's going to be this computer assisted coding and it's going to just take over, it's not true. And it is clearly somebody who has not been in the trenches like us as coders, okay? I've been in the trenches. I've gone to the meetings and I've heard and I've watched and I've looked at the demos and all of these things. You still have to have somebody to look at it, because again, they are looking, this computer system is going to be looking for keywords, key phrases, and that's what it's going to be picking up. So if you have a provider that's documenting every single condition that this patient ever had, what do you think that computer assisted coding is going to pick up? Every single thing that the patient ever had. So again, knowing this stuff and hopefully you're not discouraged by anything that you hear. This is why I tell you guys, if you're doing your research, really, that's really good, because you need to do your research and don't listen to what other people are saying, particularly if it's negative, because this is a very involved field. And yes, it is hard in the beginning to get a job. Everybody knows this. I've said it many times on my channel. Unfortunately, that is a fact of life for all medical coders. I went through it myself, but it does not mean that your studying and all of your hard work to get your credentials is in vain. Okay, it's not. You just have to stick with it. And don't listen to people when they say things like, oh, it's going away because of computer assisted coding, because clearly they don't know. Okay, so that's just my thoughts on it. And, you know, it's kind of like how the encoder, when the encoder came out and people started panicking about the encoder coming out. Now, the encoder, if you don't know, if you're brand new, an encoder is software that will look up the code for you. You just have to put in a few keywords and the code will come up. But if you go down the wrong path, a wrong code can come up. So it depends on how you're wording what you're looking for, what code will pop up. There's a difference there. So sometimes you'll get the right codes and sometimes you won't. And it's a good coder that's going to look and be sharp and say, wait a second, that code doesn't look appropriate. Let me go ahead and look it up in the book, okay? If we didn't have the encoders, we would all still be working with the book. And can you imagine how long things would take if we were still looking up codes in the book? So it's not necessarily a bad thing with the computer assisted coding. I just don't think that it is as much of a crutch as people think that it's going to be. Okay, it's not going to make it that much easier. It's not going to make it, it may make it a little faster, but you still have to be able to look and understand what's happening in this documentation. Okay, so, and again, it's a computer system, and computers are known to mess up too. Okay, but like I said, it sometimes can point out things that you as a coder, if you haven't had a lot of experience, or maybe not a lot of experience in that particular specialty, it may be able to see it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to eliminate our jobs. Okay, so if you're studying, continue to study. If you are just learning about this, no, this is not going to make us eliminated or have to go away. Okay, so I'm just saying. All right, but yes, I think that's pretty much it. There's a lot of really good coding software listed, and some of this is in the tutorials that I told you guys about that are available on YouTube. If you are looking for a job and you see that they are requiring experience with a certain software like eClinicalWorks or Epic or Cerner or any of those, they have the tutorial videos. That is the electronic health record. Okay, it's not. I'm sure encoders have those as well. But if you've ever worked with an encoder, make sure you're putting that on your resume as well. But it's a little short one tonight. But I guess I'd make it short and sweet today. So that is the show for tonight. If you have any other questions, please let me know. I hope you'll join me tomorrow for tomorrow's exciting episode. And if you haven't had a chance to, My Patreon pledge drive is still going on. So if anybody that signs up this month for my Patreon channel, and I will leave it down in the description box below, patreon.com/medicalcodingwithbleu, all one word, you'll be entered into a prize drawing, which is a session with me. The first prize is 90 minutes. The second prize is 60 minutes, and the third prize is 30 minutes via Zoom. So it could be tutoring, it could be coaching. I'm down for those. So I hope you'll enter, and the drawing will be on the 30th of July, and we'll see who wins. All right, so I'm going to wrap this one up. But if you're a medical coding student, somebody curious about the fascinating world of medical coding, a provider or a nurse, I invite you to like and subscribe and follow me on my journey in medical coding. I will see y'all next time. Bye.